progressing all well. When youth was first blossoming, ringing as a bell. All the searching in your heart, something in the swell. Wonder if it ever will mean something to tell. I know what you need, someone just to know all the things we seem to be going through. I know what you need, just someone to know all the things that you hold in secret hope. We still like to dream and such, nothing came without. I still look to graceful things, painting for our living. I see best in you, don't dare walk away. We'll as yet pull it through, make our own day. I know what you need, someone just to know all the things you still want to touch in the world. I know what you need, just someone to know all the things that you're going through. Someone just to know all the things you still want to touch in the world. I know what you need, just someone to know all the things you still love in secret hope.
All right, that was the wonderful song by Jared George, who is our special guest today. Thank you all for being here at the Corner Club this week. I, of course, am Yizz the Eunuch, and today the esteemed guest is a special man, one who I've been listening to for quite a long time. He's a regular over with Jason Kuna, whom you all know. He's on the After Party. He has his own website. He makes his own music. He's a wonderful man. And today, before we get rolling, I'd like to remind you guys, I want more of you to actively engage over on Entropy. Entropy is, of course, where you can leave us donations. But for our guests, you can leave questions and comments over on Entropy that won't disappear in the chat like on DLive and on YouTube. That's called the question widget over on the left-hand side of Entropy. Every 20 or 30 minutes, we'll be stopping to check to see what the community has to say, not just to me, but to our esteemed guest. And, of course, we're joined by my co-host like usual. Today, it's Kizza GT. So, without further ado, let's have a talk with the great Jared George. Jared, it's good to see you today, my friend. How are you doing?
You're too kind, and it's very good to be here, Yizz. We're trying the on-camera thing, so we're going to see how that flies.
We are going to see how that goes. And as a reminder to everyone, not just for the music, but also for our camera quality, we are on hillbilly internet since I live in the middle of nowhere, and the only internet I can get out here is shoddy DSL. So we're doing the best with what we got. Jared, I know that you've done a lot of things. You've worn a lot of hats when it comes to content creation and talking to people. But before we get started, I would just like to compliment you on that great song. That was your debut song, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the first one. It came out in late 2020, several months ago at this point. And
cool.
Yes.
Well, we're going to be featuring another of Jared's great songs towards the end of the stream, so definitely stay tuned for that. And of course, we are joined by my co-host Kizza. Kizza, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Alrighty, Kizza is going to be the one moderating the chat today, and of course chiming in whenever he has something useful to say to everyone. So, the first thing that I'd like to talk about with Jared George here is, Jared, you are a man who I like because from the first moment I heard you talking on tap, I could tell that you had a cultured way about you that came from a journey towards personal understanding and making sense of the world around you. And your website's called The Great Order. Is that why you called it that?
It has something to do with that, yes. I like to say when people ask me about it, it's the order of a forest, not a greenhouse. It's not to say that obviously it would be antithetical to everything else we talk about to believe that we can, just with our rational mind, kind of manage everything in life and put everything into these neat little rows. The order of the forest is obviously sometimes messy, and on the surface it can seem chaotic, but there's still this hum and this intelligence to the way that it works in the whole cosmos. So that's kind of this big grand way of saying that I do believe life has meaning and it's beautiful, and that includes the struggles and the challenges. A lot of different levels, a lot of different layers. Some of it was just practical too. I wanted something, of course, that you could spell and be easy to remember. So all of that, it kind of checked out all those boxes. It checked all those, and now it's kind of the de facto name of my being a musical artist as well. When you start something like this, it's funny. Sometimes people will call you The Great Order. That was the name of my first YouTube channel. Actually, that channel was deleted. My original YouTube channel was deleted. Like a lot of us, I've dealt with that kind of censorship and deplatforming. But my main
I've lost many account and many a page speaking the truth about things. I know the feeling.
I know you're a recent casualty on Twitter. Yes. Yeah. So
I mean, in the long past too, even back when there was not but web pages, when there was not but the beginnings of Facebook. Sometimes when you speak the truth or talk about sensitive subjects, the banhammer comes quicker than you might think.
Yeah. And we'll get to all the ramifications of that. But as you know, you have to have a handle on social media. I always wanted a website as the base, so the website was there from day one. I started with the website, kind of be the hub of what I do and catalog what I do. And now that I'm releasing music, I'm kind of one of those guys where it's a band name. It sounds like a band name, but it's one guy. It doesn't mean there won't be collaborations, but there's certain artists that take that route. So rather than Jared George, the name, when I put music out, it's still under The Great Order to tie it into this whole just cultural project, as you say. And yeah, it was definitely a lot of personal, like trying to figure out what I wanted to contribute, and a lot of reflection did go into that. And there was a lot of intention behind starting it a few years ago. But equally, there was, you have to say, I don't know exactly where this is going to lead. And you have to be comfortable with the mystery of that as well. I didn't start by saying, I definitely want to be one of these guys who gets on YouTube and talks to the camera. I have done some of that, certainly. But I was like, hey, look, if a few months later it leads to meeting someone and starting a podcast together or a stream, and it's exactly what happened with Jason, then maybe that'll become one of the main projects. It was just to kind of jump in, put the energy out there. There was a lot of specific intention behind it, but the forms that it could take, I knew it would just blossom and things would kind of happen as I put one foot in front of the other. And that's exactly what's gone on. And it's been wonderful. I
think that's how a lot of us have approached to where we've gotten, is we're like, well, I want to learn this thing, or I need to speak this thing. And we put one foot in front of the other, and that leads us to what we've become today.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the best choices that I've ever made in my life. Now, I remember the year before, like driving, because sometimes I drive to kind of clear my mind, or it's even part of my creative process. Like when I'm writing music, you don't want to too consciously be focused on the song. Obviously, when you're mixing a song, producing a song, you hear it 1,000 times and it starts to become numb. You become numb to it. So whether it's with creativity, with just like hearing a mix, or maybe I have a guitar chord progression I'll drive in my car and just, because my conscious mind, of course, has to some of that processing power has to be on the driving. It lets the subconscious slip through a little. So I'll hum a melody. I'm like, oh, that's a nice shape of a melody. So it might be creative, but in this case, I remember driving sometimes in the year or so before I launched the website, and I would be saying to myself, I know I have to do something. What is it going to be? What is it going to be called? It was so amorphous and just cloudy, but I definitely encourage people in any endeavor in life, if you just stick on it and stick with an intention of figuring out what it is you want to do and taking that raw energy you have and focusing it into something. It's like a light that's diffuse at first, and then you focus it. So it's more like a laser beam. If you start out with that intention, you have something to say or something to contribute in any way, and you just keep honing it and you keep on that path, the path will kind of unfold. As you said, as you put one foot in front of the other, the road begins to show itself more.
It's like the path of illumination or enlightenment or transcendence or any of the spiritual paths that people talk about. Mm-hmm. Is you can have a passion, you can have a desire, and oftentimes without the right tools, and a tool can be an idea and a word, because that's the toolbox we have for getting what's in here out to other people. And that's one of the reasons that I was frustrated and before I really started getting involved with modern nationalist communities, especially before I learned the Go Free lexicon from Jason and studied from his book and his works, I was frustrated that it was difficult for me to find a single, easy, relatable way to talk to the patriots and the nationalists in America, and even just regular people that aren't activists around me, mm-hmm. in a constructive way, without using white well-being as my lens, as my focus. And perhaps you didn't come to it that way. I didn't come to caring about our people and our country from antique nationalism. I was never really involved in that. But I came to it from... Say again? Sorry.
I was just saying neither was I. Yeah, nothing of the sort. Nothing.
Yeah, many of us aren't in white well-being. And the thing that made me really happy to meet people like you and Jason and other content creators that care about Western civilization and the beauty of thought and ideas that made us great is I now know there are people like me that use constructive language and ideas to talk about what's important to me. And I can learn from you. I learn from Jason. I learn from all the other people that I have met, even music creators like Fornull, even High-Riff Music's another one. She'll be on next week. Mm-hmm. It helps to have community, because the more that we learn ideas and words from others who have taken more steps than us on that illuminated path, the easier it is not just for us to follow and use that light of theirs on our path, but keep in mind that light shines behind us to help others find their way and to walk better on their path too.
That's absolutely true. And as you know, we use metaphors like that to illustrate certain points. So it's not to take anything away from what you just said, because I myself use the one foot in front of the other analogy. It's what Jason and I said to each other. I would say this to him a lot when we first began the after party on those first few months. It was a whirlwind. Put one foot in front of the other. But just as much as you can use that metaphor of a road, of that linear image of a road, it's also a spiral. And just because I've been doing this a few years longer than you, let's say, you have all of your experiences. I haven't lived the years you've lived as Yizz. And there's plenty of things we all teach each other. So in that regard, it's this spiral going back and forth, bouncing ideas around, circulating them amongst each other. So there's a circular motion to it as well. I say that just
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, just to say that no matter how long someone's been doing something or what their subscriber count is, to let that go to their head. We all learn from each other.
Yeah. When you talked about the spiral, the way that I like to think about the path forward is it's not one road that we all have to build. Like we talk about oftentimes with all of Western kind, we have many languages, religions, ethnicities, spiritual paths. And I consider the way forward an illuminated webway, like a beautiful latticework spider web that we're all building towards together, we all lay strands, we all spin a different pattern in the web, but we're all anchoring the structure that we all live on, that we all crawl on, that we all communicate together on. And hopefully we build a strong web together going forward so our little spider progeny can climb to greater heights than we did.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the web image. I'm an artist, so that my mind often works in those ways, as I was saying to you before the show. And again, to go back to the question you began with, that is the Great Order. One of the things I had to, you could say, square the circle for me and try to take something that seemed like they didn't fit and really reflect on it, is this whole idea of the one and the many, or the relationship between universals and particulars. Because, if anything, I came more from a background, I was never, even in the classical term of the sense, not in the more recent, like specifically anti-white iteration, but even in a broader sense, it's not that I was a leftist. That wouldn't be accurate to say. I was really apolitical. I didn't really follow. I wasn't one of these kids that was like following politics when I was a teenager. I'm still not really.
I came to that late myself. Yeah, I cared more about people and being and how we could make something in this soulless corporate world. That's sort of where I started with all this.
Yeah, we sound similar in that regard, is because I like to say sometimes that my proto-red pills, if anything, were cultural and aesthetic.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, I'm not an uptight guy. I like having fun. I laugh a lot. I mean, maybe that doesn't come as much through on the streams that we do. I mean, Jason and I certainly laugh and have fun, but it's serious subject matter, and sometimes it doesn't seem that way. But I'm very happy-go-lucky. I spent half of my childhood and teenage years with a close, tight group of creative friends, just laughing. I spent half of my life just laughing and having fun, but not in a shallow way. But there's a great, enjoyment of life, and there is a certain, hopefully, gregariousness that comes with that. And I grew up in a city, so I had to contend with people of different backgrounds and different lifestyles. So a lot of the extremely focused on, well, this is who you are, you're European, so is it this club where no one else is allowed in? If anything, I was coming from that perspective where it just comes with some of my upbringing or the fact that I have a creative mind. I was coming at it from a different angle. I'm not saying I was the only one. There's certainly other personalities before I stepped into this that exhibited that in their own way. But even to this day, I don't, it's not like we all sign off on everything. I don't jibe with everything I see. And in the more extreme cases that Jason and I are increasingly issuing a stern word of caution against, whether these people are actual subversives or whether they are maybe well-intentioned but just very misguided, anything that is still spewing just like very what you would think of as the actual worst case scenario, like actual hatred and bigotry, never was there, never going to be that. That's not what I'm about. And if anything,
stuff's always been naturally revolting to me, even as a youngster.
Absolutely. And there's plenty of people that aren't like that, because Jason and I do a show. We've done it a weekly show every single week for over 3 years now. And look at the whole catalog of guests that we've had. Most of them remain, the vast majority, 95% of them remain people that we stay in contact with and become friends and allies. And no one feels that way either. So it's not like we're, if anything, we're the majority in this. But I'm just saying sometimes the people who try to be edgy get a lot of attention. And I have to be honest, to this day, even who I am right now, I know it's hypothetical. It's not perfect, because obviously I've learned certain things by being involved in this. But in an alternate universe, in an alternate timeline, I'll see things sometimes where I think to myself, if this is the first thing that I saw, I would have turned and walked away. I wouldn't be here because of this stupid cartoon or this stupid, way that turn of phrase and hateful language someone is using in a song or something like that. That's not what I'm about. And so this whole thing, to go back to where this is what you had me thinking about with the web and why I said the Great Order. And one of the things that I had to, as I was starting to say, square the circle, was this idea of the one and the many, the universal and the particular. I had to really think that through. I know Oliver, who you and I both hold in high regard, Semiagog, went through a similar process, and I think in our very different ways, he and I have become friends as much as you can be, just through computers and doing shows together, because we had maybe a bit of a similar trajectory. I see other people who had a similar trajectory coming to the fore more. Jodie Kay, who I spoke to in December on her show in the UK, she's an artist, she's a musician. She was like a yoga instructor, and I know that there's stereotypes in our circles about yoga instructors, but it just goes to show it's none of these things. It's not like this club where people bring in their secondary lifestyle choices, even the best case scenario now, even if we put aside the silly, hateful stuff. But even like, oh, I have this diet, so you have to have my diet to be a real advocate for Western kind. That's really not what it's about. But that's not to say that you don't want this center. You don't want of course you want this center that center of gravity. It's kind of like the axis of the earth, that it spins around something that is stable, and then there's all this other stuff going on around it. And there even in a society, this gets into other considerations too that we hear sometimes about. Some people want conceive like a very, very authoritarian kind of future. And, on the one hand, I can understand people are seeing what's going on in clown world right now, in the insane anti-white, anti-Western, anti-human, really, because it's a war against meaning and life itself.
It is.
On many levels.
I was actually going to bring that up here in a minute.
Yeah. So on the one hand, I can understand people wanting to swing the pendulum the other way. But if anything, I worked out my whole thing, just to back up for 1 second, about the one and the many. I wrote 9 foundational essays on my website, and they really haven't changed since I published them 3.5 years ago. If anyone's really interested to get deep under the iceberg with me, it's kind of a metaphysics of where I come from and why I do this. And it plays into what I was about to say, where, if you swing the pendulum to the authoritarian thing, then we're just getting into this pendulum swinging. And I don't want to live in a world where it's like we have a few decades of Weimar, and then a few decades of ultra-authoritarianism, where anyone that's a little bit outside of the norm has to fear for walking down the street. And I think your experiences in particular, you would be able to appreciate something like that, Yizz. Can we sit here and say that even though, because the moment in history calls for it, and I'm a healthy man of Western descent, that I'm going to address the imbalances in my time and what I have the agency to address? I'm sure there's imbalances in Chinese civilization or in India, but I can't speak as an Indian man to Indian men. I'm a Western man. So this is part of what I see as, we all have our own garden to tend to. It doesn't mean that we never, ever, ever care about what other people outside of our civilization do if we're met with reciprocity and friendship, of course. That's one of our large, it's been exploited against us, as you know, that kind of openness. But I still maintain that openness. I didn't try to kill it in myself. I didn't say to myself, oh, Jared, because you're getting involved in this, you have to put on jackboots and it's all about authoritarianism. It was more, I'm an open-minded creative person, even as far as Westmen go. Mm-hmm. How do I realistically take that and not suppress it in myself, because that's going to be psychologically and spiritually unhealthy, but how do I evolve that? And how do I use that ingredient in the recipe that is my life and my consciousness and express it in the best way it can? So I can get up here, and a large amount of what I'm known for, a large amount of my time and energy goes into addressing, as I said, crises and imbalances in Western civilization and the harm against our people. But does that mean that I can never admit that I like a song by a black artist? Does it mean I could never be friends with a non-white person again? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. And we show that by the very way that we do this. I'm always speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for him, but it is a fact of the matter. Jason has people, non-white people, calling into his show going free. and saying how they appreciate what he's doing and they can respect the strength of a man who's not kowtowing to the insane agenda going on right now. That's the kind of well-rounded balance and hopefully wise approach that we want to engender in the world. And when we see that in other people, whether they be fellow Westmen or even non-white people, well, we can appreciate that and we can respect each other. That's the general frame that I'm coming to, and that's what I was like when I was 10 years old. That's what I'm like now, and that's what I'm going to be like if I make it to 90 years old. Nothing's changing about that. And like I said, I had to do a lot of soul searching to kind of figure out, because it wasn't quite clear at first how I could be realistic about who I am again, but still take a very firm stand in this and not come up here and be wishy-washy and be a centrist. It's all relative, because it's so funny what we think of as like normal. There's still a lot of people out there that think like what we think is mild, they think is like extreme. So it's all that kind of thing is relative because of how the anti-white propaganda that's been rolled out over the last few decades. But
yeah, tell me about it. That's one of the things I started battling after I started realizing the things I realized was like a couple of things you talked about earlier. I'd like to lead into my next thing with you before we take a comment break here, is coming to use your language, the great order of things. When I was young, I went to art school. I wanted to learn how to paint and to sculpt like the classics did. I've done a lot of landscaping. I've done some minor sculpture work. I've done oil painting and all things under the moon. And I wanted to do that for the sake of, I knew I came from a civilization that had cathedrals and great works of art the world over. And it wasn't because I wanted to self-aggrandize. I just felt like, hey, I feel it in me to create and to make resonant beauty happen because of my actions. And in doing that, by the time I was in my young 20s, exploring music and art, I realized very quickly how soulless and ugly expressions of my people had become since the 50s and 60s. And that was really my first introduction into the decay of the West, was art. Was realizing, look at all of this modern art. Listen to the music that's coming out now in the early aughts. Look at what's on billboards. Look at what is on the covers of magazines. It's degeneracy. It's ugly. It has nothing to do with using the brush or the hammer and the chisel to make something beautiful and lasting. It's just this ugly, soulless, hedonistic garbage. And it wasn't until 10 years after that before I even learned that it was anti-white garbage. I just realized none of this stuff that I'm seeing makes me feel good. Like when I look at a classical painting from 500 years ago, or I look at beautiful bushes and flowers and a swing set and a woman's dress from a Baroque era painting, even though Baroque's not my favorite, when I look at this, I say, the stuff that I see now, especially at art school, the things being shown as, oh, this is modern art, and oh, look how wonderful these nonsensical pieces of things put together in a room with duct tape and caution tape making this this faux crime scene. Oh, isn't this art? To me, I was like, bleh, vomit. This is like a joke I would see in Mad Magazine. This isn't artwork. This is trash. And yet it was what was lauded in art magazines. It's what the art professors at my small college talked about. And that was the first sign that there was a real cancer at play. And coming to the web way, or the order of things, throughout my 20s, which was the aughts for me, I started realizing that we had lost our way. And I believed that powerful, rich people and statists, which is what I used to call the anti-white narrative, the anti-white agenda, I used to think that it was globalist-minded monopo state, meaning monopolies and megacorps and governments, that didn't want us to have spirituality or passions that we could manifest to build strong communities, because they knew that that's what would make us strong and not need them and fight back against them. And in a way, I was right about that. It's just I didn't grasp the whole story yet. So my next question to you, coming from all of this, would be, when I first started making my journey towards racial consciousness and realizing that Western civilization came from Western kind, not being someone who's an antique nationalist or whoever ethically condoned any type of ethnic, racial, or religious hatred. It was difficult for me to make my peace with all of the anti-white lies that told me I should be guilty and have white guilt and all of that stuff. Do you remember a moment or a crucible that made you really click and say, "Hey, this this is not the way"? The progressive, the anti-white lies and stuff, and artwork and music and expression. Do you remember a point in your life that really made you cross that interpersonal Rubicon to a healthy consciousness about your own people and why they're important to civilization?
Well, first of all, I'd love to see some of your paintings sometime. I don't quite know if I was aware you had that much experience. It's great to hear. And again, it sounds
Well,
like
after the stream, I'll go get one off the wall I have hanging up, and I'll show it to you.
Sounds good. We have, again, I mentioned this earlier, it sounds like you and I have similar stories where, because of, I guess, our native personalities, our natures, our red pills, it sounds like you and I both share this, were largely, in the beginning, cultural and aesthetic, or how even people comport themselves and manner themselves. So on that note, related to your question, there wasn't a very hard line before and after moment. I always relate it more to a knob being turned up rather than a flipping a switch. And I never seemed to have a lot of the personality traits where I was always seeking the truth, like you said, and I always had this compass for justice and order and truth. Funny, because the anti-white left will use terms like justice as well, I know, and gets a little tricky with that.
Yeah.
Because you'll have people who they just have an inverted worldview where they don't mind, as you said, even if they're white themselves, doing harm to white people, because in the narrative that they've imbibed, it's okay because it's kind of resetting these cosmic scales. Like, because of colonialism, because of slavery, even though everyone practiced slavery, you know, we just get the one. It's like a magic trick. Don't look at what this hand's doing. The media and the professors, they just talk about certain slavery so that they can push their narrative.
Yeah. And they always leave out the part that it's the Anglos that worked hard to end it, and Europeans in general were the ones that were heavily opposed to owning people as property, even going back hundreds of years.
Yes, yeah. Even if you want to follow that narrative, then we've already have a retribution arc within that story, well established already.
Yeah.
But again, they'll say the sky is green, the sky is red to get their ends. They're always anti-white. That's what we always have to be very aware of. So I mentioned that more to bring it to the personal, to your question, to say it was never in my nature to go whole hog on that. You used that term whole hog before, so I'll steal that.
I'm a hillbilly. We're used to that phrase around here.
I hadn't heard that in a little bit, and I like that one, so we'll go with it.
You probably heard Semigog say it, Oliver. You probably heard him say it too.
Yeah. Well, see, this just goes and shows all the different hues of Western kind. Even within our United States, there's all these regions and cultures. It's a beautiful thing. All that to say is that I'm sure I wasn't as aware of these things when I was younger, of course, but I wasn't one of these people that thought, oh, well, yeah, we have to hurt ourselves. So there's always that issue of, I don't know, this is a bit of a side topic, but just to complete the thought, because I feel like maybe I'm not making sense unless I say this. I was on PWR the other day with Jason, of course, as a co-host.
I saw that.
And he strongly made the case where even the young people in college sitting around with refugee welcome signs, he's like, he doesn't really buy the fact that they're good people and that their instincts have been misplaced. Now, I have to think about this a little bit more. I want to pick his brain a little bit more on this, to be honest. But he made a very strong case that even those people who they think they're doing something good, refugees welcome, he would go up to them when he was in college and say, do you realize that someone who was qualified to come here can't come here just because they're of European heritage? I mean, what do you think about that? Where does that fall in your whole cosmic scale of justice? And a lot of these people were like, they don't care. So Jason was like, he spoke very strongly about the fact that he's like, I don't even buy the fact that these are quote unquote good people who are just misguided. In his view, most of them are just, there's something askew. There's something very askew in their whole moral structure and their whole structure.
I think that as much as we don't agree with many of the value points that Professor Dutton might make, he is spot on with calling that product of bioleninism the spiteful mutant. And I had to deal with those at college and even afterwards when I tried to be involved with different kinds of activism and community groups. It was like the hollowness of what's been stripped from us, the century of bioleninism here in America. I am prone to agree with what Jason said on PWR about these people not being good or misled, because the soullessness of this anti-white narrative, it attracts people who are shallow and petty and don't mind to be the bully and the villain. And they actively, in my opinion, from my experience at least, many of them know that they are harming Western kind, and they see that as a value. And that's why many of our religious folks call our enemies satanic, is because their morality is inverted. They believe harming your own kind and destroying the family is a moral good, and that's sick.
Yes, they want to harm. That's exactly right. That was the thrust of what he was saying. But to get back to where you began, if I can pinpoint one thing for me, I think it has to be in late 2015, the invasion into Europe, what is ostensibly called the refugee crisis.
Yeah, that was a big one for me too.
When I saw those lines walking in, and it's mostly males, and we know the terrorism that's gone on, and funny enough, this is just one of those life moments, one of those where sometimes your life feels like a novel, and there was a little foreshadowing. I went to a Christian school for elementary school, and we had a pretty tough but very good 8th grade teacher, and he wanted to get us ready for high school, and he had very high standards, and we had to do one of the biggest projects of the year in 8th grade was the religious studies project. And each of us was assigned in the class, we were assigned an era in the history of the church or the history of Christianity. And it was up to us to write, I think, a pretty sizable paper for an 8th grader, like a 10-page paper, and do a presentation in front of the class and share teach the class about that era that had been assigned to you. And it was teaching you as well to do research and references. It had to be footnoted. So it was, really high level for 8th grade to get you ready for high school. Just so happens mine was called The Islam Christian Confrontation of the 7th Century. It was about the very beginning of Islam in the 600s and how quickly it spread in the Arab world, in the desert, and then the first attacks into Europe and the first time that our civilizations met. And it just so happened, and not that I'm one of these people I'm not one of these, like, what's his name? Douglas Murray, one of these guys in the UK that really focuses on Islam. But at that moment, when I saw the people walking in and realized this is a Trojan horse, they're going to have, I knew there was going to be a pretense and a pretext to never return them. My body went cold. And at the similar time, I don't remember if it was right before or right after, I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I heard about the grooming scandals in the UK as well. And this speaks to biospirit as well, because here I am, I'm in America, okay, but I'm hearing about things happening in England and Sweden, and I'm not prone to exaggerate with something like this. I had a physical reaction. I mean, I didn't like vomit, but my body got tense. I felt like something was happening to someone in my family. Imagining what these girls had gone through. I don't even really want to talk about it now. I get extremely upset.
It's disgusting. It's revolting.
And the fact that, and by the way, one of the very first people I spoke to just some months into starting the Great Order, she can't be too active right now because she's still in an ongoing, all these years later, 3 years later, is still in a court case. But I spoke to a woman in the UK who had been raped. And she largely had to, amazing woman, Maverick, had to educate herself, represent herself. She was offered a job at a law firm, hadn't studied law, but basically taught herself all these things. And we did a stream actually on her channel, and I asked her all about this. And to hear about what's covered up and the excuses and the hypocrisy and the double talk, I had already known it by that point, by the time I was on air with her. But those things, what was happening in Europe, certainly woke me up. And then, as I said, just prior to that, just seeing kind of junk culture in the United States, to bring it home a little bit more, but a little more diffuse prior to very pointed things like that, the refugees coming in, the Mama Merkel thing in 2015. It was just, again, like, it's not, some people assume that because I talk about culture and things like that, that I like have a PhD in philosophy or history. I'm just a guy that's learning this stuff along the way. There's so much that I don't know. There's so many other content creators that know so much more than I do academically and technically. And even some people were surprised to see that the music that I make is going to be some different types, but largely could be called rock and roll, and that I like rock and roll. People make assumptions. They think that, because in certain quarters here, if you're talking about virtue and health, then you only have to listen to classical music and read Homer, and that's it. It's like, look, we all grew up in this world. I went to nightclubs and danced, had fun, never got into drug culture, thank God, and drinking. Even though I'm a creative person, I was very lucky to have a circle of friends where we just knew that was not the way, man. But as I said, I grew up in a city. I went to a creative school for university like you did, Yizz. I've been friends with people from different backgrounds, different lifestyles. But even so, just seeing crap pop culture, like you said, and like thug ghetto culture through rap being promoted, like you'd look around and be like, something's not right here. I'm pretty open-minded, but I'm not a stick in the mud. I'm not a Puritan, but come on. This is just meaningless garbage. Yeah. This is not telling anyone anything. It's not, as you said, it's not making you feel alive and invigorated and engendering something inspiring within you.
Yeah.
And that
like
is
when you hear music that glorifies cheating on your wife, when you hear music that glorifies shooting police, when you see artwork that is representative of or even directly glorifying the gross authoritarian depravity and oppression and the artwork that came about from those styles and from the Frankfurt School type of ideas, it in my opinion, if you are a Westman that is in tune with your biospirit, that stuff should make you feel physiologically ill, because it is a reflection of cancer. It's a reflection of sickness. And I felt that from an early age. It took me a lot of years to learn why or even how to speak about it. But surely that's exactly what you're talking about here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's a good point for us to transition and go over to talking to the chat and seeing what people have to say to both me and Jared George, my illustrious guest. So let's go ahead and see what we have in the paid chat variety. I'm going to go ahead and refresh PayPal and Entropy here, and we're going to see what's going on Cash App. All right, it looks like Cash App and PayPal are still free, and we have a lot of activity over on Entropy. So we're going to start with that. We have the Alabastard, one of my most lovely, loyal Yizraelites today. She gives 25 US. Say again?
I like that. Alabastard.
The Alabastard, yeah. She works in professional sports doing physical therapy out west. So she's in the belly of the beast.
Very nice.
And the Alabastard, one of my loyal Yizraelites, gives us 25 US dollars to say, not much to say today, but enjoying yet another great stream, Yizz. Thank you so much, sister. I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. And over in the Tall Kevin widget, giving it its name, Tall Kevin is with us today. Hello, my friend. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Tall Kevin says, we have to be accepting of others' differences who want to serve white well-being, but not have too much of an open mind. Be careful, else it be filled with garbage. Do you have anything to say to that, Jared?
No, that's absolutely right. Everything is a balance. I thought he was going to say the old one. I've heard a bunch of, you don't want to be too open-minded that your mind falls out.
Yeah,
But,
I've heard that too.
yeah, it's always a balance. It's always a harmony. I mean, even I try to think in metaphors. I think I don't know if I included this in those foundational essays, but even in your own body, remember 7th grade biology, cells of semi-permeable membranes. It's if they never open up, the cells, if the walls of the cell membrane are never porous, then waste can't leave, and a cell is still a biological organism, and it dies. It has to let. But if it's not porous, if it's too porous and it never closes its cell walls, then pathogens come in. So anything in life works that way. There's a time to open your door and invite people in, and there's a time to close your door and just have your private life with the people you're closest with in the 4 walls of your home. I mean, it reflects on every level of life. That's why I named my project, my umbrella, the Great Order.
And the analogy I like to use, since I've studied warfare and weapons and armor a lot, is flexibility versus integrity. Is you don't want your sword or your axe blade or your haft to be so hard that it isn't flexible at all, but you need it to be strong enough to be a successful weapon or shield. And I think that's what Tall Kevin is getting at over here.
Very much.
So,
Do you ever talk to Semi-Agog?
Say again?
Sorry, I was just saying, do you ever talk to Semi-Agog about weapons and armor? Because I know that's a passion of his as well.
We got off, whenever we were in D.C. together, we talked about it just briefly, but then we segued to something else. But he is an interesting man who I could sit with for hours talking to him about minutia and history and artwork and sculpture and stuff. He's a very interesting man, and I would like to have him on stream one day. So maybe we'll make that.
I'm going to recommend this to him. Absolutely. I'll tell him he has to come on here. I'd love to hear the two of you speaking.
Well, I would love that too. Now, Kizza, what did you have to say?
On the point regarding swords and shields, what I was going to say as the engineer here, this is what's known as the difference between brittleness and malleability. And it's about
we want to be malleable but not brittle, right? That's your point?
No, brittle's when something has no flex in it, so it instantly snaps.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Whereas malleability is something that can bend and flex, but the problem is if it bends and flexes too much, it can easily be wrapped up in something you don't want it to.
Okay. Well, let's move on here. The next thing on the question widget is from Carlotta. Hello, Carlotta. Carlotta asks Jared, has Jared ever met Jason in person? How about John? Will we get used to having significant interactions with people we might hardly ever or maybe never meet in person?
Well, John lives across the ocean. I know I'm welcome to go visit him. Jason and I, you're going to be seeing more of interaction between he and I, and that's all I'll say on that for now. But Jason and I are close as ever.
That's good to hear. And one of the things I was going to bring up to the white well-being community is I'm actually scheduling a barbecue get-together for the American Patriot and MAGA community that I've been doing activism with the last 6 months. We're going to meet up for the leaf change this fall, late September, early October. And I would like to do something similar for the white well-being community too, maybe around the same time or a different time of year, just to bring people that want to come together a chance to celebrate together and take pictures together and stuff. Not necessarily to put online, but just to have memories and build personal connections and networking together. I think that's important going forward.
Yeah, very true.
So now that we've handled everything on entropy, let's go ahead and move over to Trovo. We have 2 over on Trovo. Hello, good to see you, Morty. Nice to see you there, friend. Over on D-Live, we've got a few people over here, too. Hello to all of you there. Thank you, Taranek, for donating the ice cream and the lemons. Good to see you, too, Competent Promises. And on YouTube, we have a lot of viewers. We're up to 40 already. We've got a lot of scrubbage. That's the scrubs from Dangerfield's community. I see we've got Jess with us, Watt Tyler, Steve Cray. We've got Linda Hunter with us today. Oh, European Housewife is with us, Jared. I didn't even notice that. Let's say a big Promethean hails to her.
Hello, yes. And great to hear from all these other people as well. And if I'm new to you, then I hope you're able to check out what I do with Jason, what I do with John Bruce Leonard of Arctos. We're trying to do something I think you could hear that has There's a center to it. It's not gooey in the middle, but it's still open and loving. We have all kinds of people with us in our community. We know everyone has a story. We don't, it's a movement of redemption, as Jason says. It's all about what we do going forward, how we use that. So it's always great to speak to new people. We have new people in our chat often, and we say hi to them. Sometimes we even say hi to the wallflowers, because we know there's people listening who aren't necessarily typing in the chat, and they're new. They're checking it out. I understand what it's like. You dip your toe in. Everything in our society around us tells us that this is the most taboo, the most evil thing in the world to, oh my God, be of European descent and actually not hate yourself and care about your people. It's not the absolute only thing we talk about either, of course, but it just kind of it gives a shape. We're regular people living our lives. And the same thrust, you asked me about where I began. Now that I'm talking, thinking out loud, I'll just complete the thought by saying this.
Go ahead.
Is a lot of the thrust behind what I do is even broader than what we're talking about with Western kind and addressing the moment we're in. It's just being an agent of health and harmony in general. I've always been interested in health in the general sense. The first time I spoke to Jason, when he used the term well-being, I was like, yeah, well-being. That's just hearing that term, well-being, sounds good. It's just well-rounded, and everything's kind of humming, and mind, body, spirit is taken care. It's all flowing in the right direction. That's not to say you never have any problems or issues or questions or challenges. We all do. There's no pure stasis in life. It's clearly, no matter what your religious or spiritual belief, clearly that's not what this plane of existence is about. We live in a world of flux and change. There's death and decay and rebirth, the seasons. But as you ride that, if you can have some kind of, as I keep talking about, some kind of center of gravity that is your foundation, then I think you can make it through all right. And we try to keep that string tuned, that note sounding in what we do. So all that to say, people from Dangerfield's community, if this is new to you, absolutely love speaking to new people. I want to, in what I do with Jason, in what I do with John on the other show I do now, and just in general. Jason and I have been talking about this. Don't want to say too much behind the scenes info, of course, but you've already seen a little of it. We want to reach out to other people, not so that we become centrists, just to learn and spread this and have interesting conversations and create our own culture going forward, because there has to be an alternative to, as you were saying, Yizz, all the rot and the disgusting meaninglessness that is being spoon-fed, force-fed down our throat from what passes for culture, what's in a lot of what's mainstream popular culture. And that's not to say we turn our backs on everything. I mean, there's people that do really interesting work analyzing movies that have come out recently. As I said, I myself, it's not like I'm a classical musician. I'm a rock guitar player, Yep. We all live in this world. We were all influenced by these things. I've been influenced by things that, yes, if you wanted to slice it and dice it and analyze it, yes, there's parts of it that maybe weren't that great. There are seeds of degeneracy in it. I'm all about agency. You put me in a clip from me and John's show up there a second ago. We talk about this all the time on our show, Learning in Public. I do with John Bruce Leonard. He is the editor-in-chief of Arctos Publishing and an author, if anyone doesn't know him. We talk about all the time agency and consciousness. It's not, oh my God, I'm so scared. I used to listen to this kind of music, or I used to watch movies, so I'm poisoned. Or even if, I know that sounds that doesn't sound very dramatic to some people. It's like, you used to do drugs, we know Dangerfield's story. Fine. It's what you do with it now. It's all about what you do with it now. You come to a different point in your life. You have consciousness. You have agency. That's your clay. Everything you've learned and everything you've experienced up until this point is your clay. You can't throw out the clay. It's up to you to be conscious and reshape, remold the clay, use it for something good now.
Yeah, we are malleable, to use that term earlier that Kizza told us. And with your clay metaphor,
malleable, yes.
Yeah, and with your clay metaphor, remember, we can shape ourselves as we grow. Humans are dynamic. We are a dynamic people. We're not static. We're always going to grow and think differently than we did last year or even last month. And going forward, it's important to realize no matter what failings you have or what mistakes you made, those are not part of your current self, because you can work those out of you or change a weakness into a strength. We're malleable, and we need to consciously work on ourselves to make the best shape we can with the clay that we were given.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Speaking of John, you do a podcast with him, and this is the clip that I featured is "Don't download your consciousness onto a hard drive." Now, we're not going to listen to it. This is just something that I wanted to bring up to feature some more of your work. I've listened to about 5 of your podcasts with John. I really like the back and forth you two have, because you don't just talk about pointless morality, or you don't just flap your gums about what should be. You talk about interpersonal growth. You talk about not just what should be, but what could be, with how we can take action and shape things together. So now would be a great time for you to tell my viewers and myself some more about the focus of what you and John work on together, and any particular projects you and John have coming up, if you like.
Right. So again, John is an author. He's American, but he lives in Italy with his family. And we've been doing Learning in Public since late 2020. It's actually not quite yet a podcast technically, but we want to make it one. We want to reach out more. I was speaking about outreach to the podcast community and find different audiences there, because I don't think that show has really found its audience yet. John and I, it came out of a friendship as we got to know each other more, and had some very long, in-depth conversations in this last summer. And we both realized we want to contribute something, but it's not like we have, as I said, I'm not very academically studied in one particular area. And I came up with this turn of phrase. I said it, so I'll really speak for myself with this, but John did seem to agree. Although he is very well versed in classics and ancient Greek philosophy. He went to a particular college here in the States where it's based all on the great books, if you could imagine that. So he's very familiar with the classic Western canon. But the premise is I'm an expert of nothing. I'm an expert of nothing. And I'm not trying to get up here and act like I'm an expert of anything. But that doesn't mean that we don't have anything to say.
Yeah, sort of like you, I'm more of a jack of all trades when it comes to philosophy, theosophy, art, politics, history. To me, I don't have any formal education on any of it. And in a way, I'm glad that I'm like that. I feel like sort of being cast to the winds, so to speak, after I left home at an early age. It sort of helped me bounce around through a couple of different majors in college. It helped me get while not a good understanding, a basic understanding of a lot of different topics. And as I progressed through my 20s, I got to autodidactically learn about many different facets of our civilization and our history. And I think that really helped me, instead of having to look at something through one academic lens that I spent 10 years studying.
Yes, there's a few ways to dice that. It actually speaks to the very thrust of what you were about to ask about that clip, which we'll get to in a moment.
Sure.
Again, always about this balance. Because I do feel, you mentioned the very narrow focus, I do feel one of the ills of the modern world is that a lot of it conspires to make us too compartmentalized. Knowledge used to flow among all the different fields a little more openly, as far as I know. And not even in terms of you being a man or woman of letters. I'm not even talking about formal education and academia. I'm just talking about in our everyday lives. This is part of why people are able to be duped right now into these ridiculous notions where a man could become a woman could become a man, just willy-nilly, just because they say so, kind of thing, and all the other elements we see going on. Take your pick of the examples. The reason people are able to buy that kind of thing, and I'm just speaking very generally right now, kind of metaphysically, is that the modern world is giving us these half philosophies. As we all know, to tell a good lie, it has to have a kernel of the truth, which ultimately still reflects the power and the finality of truth. And it's these half lies that are.
I'm sorry to cut in, but it's one of my favorite things from X-Files when Deep Throat's talking to Mulder, and he says, the best place to hide a lie, Mr. Mulder, is between two truths.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, right? And we have to be very aware of that. So I do think a lot conspires to make people less well-rounded. Again, another word John and I use probably every single episode is holistic. Probably our favorite word, and the word that comes up the most on that show is holistic or harmony. Again,
it's a great word.
It's the drive behind what I do. So, yeah, we wanted. What I was going to say too is this is why it's good to talk to others like we're doing now, though, because sometimes I get to rub shoulders with people that do have very specific bits of knowledge, or like John himself, even though he is like me, somewhat of an artist with a web-like mind and searching and exploring. He also does have that very solid base in literature and philosophy. And you do want to be able to bounce off people like that as well, because even though I appreciate what you said, Yizz, about educating yourself and trying different things, and I have that in my experience as well, I do think that there's wisdom in the old phrase that a little bit of knowledge can be a very dangerous thing. There's a lot of people who are, higher than average intelligence, and they know a little bit about this and a little bit about that, and they come to some pretty wacky conclusions, or they're led down some pretty wacky pathways. So
in discourse, we call those dangerous midwits.
Yeah. So we have to be, like anything, I keep coming back to this, there has to be a balance. So that particular clip is indicative of what we talk about on the show. A lot of it has that thrust still of we're two men of Western descent who care about Western civilization. But we use that show salon style just to see what comes up. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes it's just the two of us. Sometimes we have a seed topic. And sometimes we go in cold. We call those wild cards. And we literally just put it on and see what comes up. That's why I take clips from them sometimes as well, because obviously
I think it's good to keep it fresh and do that too. Maybe 4 or 5 times on my streams, I've just gone into it cold with some friends just to talk about stuff and see what rises to the top.
Sometimes that's my favorite thing to do. And after the After Party's 3-year anniversary, the show I do with Jason, we did a couple of episodes of what we call It's Late Night Somewhere, where everyone is on audio, even people who willingly show their face, like me and Jason. We're all audio, so it has the feel of one of those old FM late night radio shows. And it just brings something different out of people when it's that spontaneous and personal. And a lot of it is useful in the moment. I'm not saying that every minute of a 2 or 3 hour show that was spontaneous is going to be gold, obviously. So sometimes the benefit of it, the usefulness of it is just it's in the moment for the people who were there and that were listening. You had to be there, like it was a performance. But there's still some really good stuff that comes from it. I made some clips from those shows too. The It's Late Night Somewhere shows we did last month. And as I said, I made clips from the show I do with John, because sometimes you find these good 5 or 10 minute nuggets that get to, well, they, first of all, they represent well what we do. But second of all, of course, why I'm asking you to give me your time, because that's what you're doing on social media. You're asking someone to give you, their precious time, is hopefully it'll inspire some thoughts and it'll make you want to go connect more dots. That's what John and I do, a salon style show. As I said, even when we do have a seed topic, it can kind of go wherever it needs. We don't have bullet points of all these different things we're going to talk about. And not only is there, I'd like to think, I hope, that sometimes there's something useful in what we actually say. But John and I are also very aware of this. We've spoken about this. Just the mere fact that we're approaching it that way on a wider lens, taking a step out, bird's eye view, is just the fact we're approaching it that way. That communicates something as well. That's almost symbolic as well, because John and I both are communicators and we yearn to connect more with people. But we're also two people who, we don't like a lot of internet culture. We don't like a lot of the fast talking, get attention and have a kind of a what word am I looking for? Not kitsch. You have like, I don't know. I'm lost for what I want.
Maybe the word you're looking for is catchy. You're not looking to be sensational, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs a hook. I'm a musician. I write pop songs with I like catchy choruses. I'm not saying you can't have a hook. You have to have something. You have to have something where you're telling a story and have some bit of direction to it. And I do want to get better at that in my own social media sharings. I've been thinking about that a lot too. It's like, what story are you telling? What are you inviting people into? Because I was a bit reluctant to do this, even though I have a past where I performed. Sometimes people assume because you're up here, you must love the sound of your own voice, or you must love people looking at you. It's not necessarily the case.
I can't speak for you, but a lot of us hate the sound of our own voice.
Yeah. It's always different listening to your own voice, especially when you're singing. No, there was a certain reluctance, and part of it is internet culture. As I was saying, we don't really like when you have to have that soundbite kind of culture where everything or controversy. Some people are here to actually create a community and a culture, and some people are here to kind of leech off of that and just kind of gossip about the different personalities going on. It's like there's this whole ecosystem.
I despise that myself. I can't stand any of that. Like the internet blood sports and the internet drama and all that stuff. I couldn't be farther away from that. I've never cared about it, and I probably never will.
Yeah, so all that to say, even though there was a word before, and I swear I've done this a few times, I've done a few streams, there was a word before that was escaping my mind. Yeah, hopefully I've done a decent job trying to let you know that we're just trying to we're using the internet in our own way. As I said before, your own agency. Just because you're on Instagram doesn't mean you have to, take stupid Instagram selfies of yourself. You can use it in an interesting way. There's some people like the Golden One who was on tap recently. He's really good at presenting a story. And obviously that's a focused thing. A lot of it is about bodybuilding and health, and a lot of young men. There's something very solid there to hook into. You want to get better at that. There's information you can get from him. There's training tips and all this. But it's not just that. I mean, there's a whole aesthetic.
Reminds me of the recent tap with the Golden One recently.
Yeah, there's a whole worldview, and we got into that a lot with him. But he's very good. There's a reason why he has a large following that he's developed over the years. If you really look at his website and then his different social media, they don't always say the same thing. Sometimes it's best to follow someone on all the different places: Gab, Telegram, Instagram. He was kicked off of Instagram, but sometimes people post certain things on one and they don't do it on another, so you kind of have to follow them everywhere. But he uses it very intelligently. He has his fingers in a lot of pies. He has a clothing company, a supplement company, but he's not doing it in that way where it's like, razzmatazz, I'm a guy selling you things. That's what I was getting at before. Like, I would normally roll my eyes at like, oh my, another bodybuilder selling his supplements. But with the Golden One, because I know he's a guy who has a similar worldview and he's a virtuous man, I'm like, yeah, I would buy his supplements. I'd support him. So it's all about the context. He tells a very clear story. If you want to join him on that journey and that story, everything he does, his images, how he speaks, what he writes, it all is and it's multifaceted. Sometimes he'll share thoughts on a book he's reading, but it all flows in a certain direction. I'm trying to challenge myself to get better about that, especially since I'm presenting music now. You have to give people, can't just put music out there. You have to give people something to hook into. You have to do something give them a story, give them visuals, make them feel like they're part of a world, and do that together. And if I can I'm doing that more and more. I'm trying to stretch out and get more comfortable with that. And as much as we talk about social media, oh, it's shallow, sign of the times, no one connects anymore. Not necessarily. I have good relationships in my own real life, but it is actually, it's fun to do this. It's great to do this, to connect. The reason why, in the best sense of the word, we know that we've been manipulated by Silicon Valley companies. Don't get me wrong, and I know they're very nefarious, but like anything, you use the tools with your own agency. in the best sense of the term, the reason why social media is addictive, it's because of the social aspect. Obviously, it's because we all want to connect with other people. Hopefully you don't want to just, it's not just about the dopamine hit of getting the likes. That's, if you're waking up just to see, you can't wake up without rolling over to your phone. I don't even sleep with the phone in my room. But if you're waking up and you check, the thing you posted last night, how many likes does it have now? You might want to look into that. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not healthy.
That's the unhealthy version of connectivity and wanting to be a part of things and have community.
Doing what we're doing, talking, connecting, the real human person-to-person connection. And even, yes, you can do that by everything that you choose to do, even what you share on Instagram, the image, it all communicates something. I am a communicator. I am fascinated with that. And so it's, as much as I mentioned I had a certain reluctance, it's almost like a moth to a flame. I can't really resist it either. This is the day and age I live in. This is how people communicate. And I'm going to use those tools of communication, hopefully to inject something positive and healthy into it.
Yeah, that's the path that I've taken in the last year and a half was I knew that I wanted to make a difference. And I could use my skills of speaking and knowing how to quote unquote hack, because hacking isn't just programming. It's knowing how to get people to trust you, how to let them give you access to certain things. And I didn't want to spread the lexicon of white well-being or the ideas I have in my head in ways that weren't holistic, to use that word that we like. So about a year ago, I said, well, what do I love? I like political commentary. I like video games. I like laughing at degeneracy. I like mocking clown world. I like people who are in pursuit of the truth. That's what led me to the Cabal, which is that commentator, creator, streamer guy, Uzulu, that I've been a part of his community for a while. It's what led me to being part of the news group that feeds into Tim Pool's newsroom. And I wanted to make connections with people, and that's what led me to the MAGA Patriot community, is I want to spread my ideas, but not in a unholistic attack vector, but through a natural vector of making friends and sharing ideas and being part of a community of people who genuinely want to spend time with me and talk to me. So I like American stuff, like, guns and going camping and fishing and going to barbecue and stuff. I love that kind of thing because I'm a hillbilly. And I love the internet culture stuff that I like that I just went over. And doing that kind of thing has really opened up a lot of opportunities for me to share healthy ideas about white well-being, raising a healthy amount of racial consciousness to realize how and why our people are being attacked and why our culture is being sabotaged the way it is. And I feel like approaching it that way gives me a much stronger voice and a much wider net to cast to get people sort of on board with wanting to quote unquote save the West or whatever, because I don't want to scare people or propagandize people into believing they have to fight, because I don't want a repeat of what came after Weimar. I want to subvert all of that towards something healthier and stronger, even though we're already at that point in a lot of ways. So making the connections that I've done, I think, has really helped me spread the curative contagion of white positivity and dispelling this evil hex that the Bolshevik witches threw on us, this white guilt nonsense. And I think that what we're doing here is the best vector for that curative contagion to spread. What do you think about that?
I like what you said about, that word vector. I get what you're saying with that. I hear you. The way that I would relate it, there's not really much to add. Beautifully said.
Okay.
I think you used the word subvert. It might have been misdirected instead.
Well, I guess counter subversion is what I mean.
Yeah, counter the kind of thing. And look, we know there had to be more to what meets the eye than we get from typical history about that era. And people can explore that in their private lives. But to make that the centerpiece, we've already talked about why that's not a wise move. But what I'll just add, just as a metaphor to what you're saying, is you don't walk up to someone at a party and say, just meet them. You're just meeting them for the first time and say, hey, yeah, let's go attack these people or F these, and then drop racial epithets. And I'm not even saying this in terms of like, you'll eventually do that when you get to know them. I don't do that in my private life anyway. All of us here, we know that political correctness is kind of nonsense and people don't want to feel like we're muzzled in our language. But I believe that words have energy behind them. And those words, they were still often used in a very acerbic, hateful way. There's no way around it. I'm not going to sit here around and say, F these, it's not who I am. It's disgusting to me. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that to score brownie points with anyone. I'm saying it because if that doesn't resonate with you, then I'm not for you. Or maybe you used to be that way, but you're sensing there might be a different way forward. Well, that's important for someone like me to say that so that they know there are people out there like this. Because I bet you there's some people out there right now, Yizz. Well, in a larger sense, there's a ton of people out there right now who are on the doorstep of what we generally do and are checking it out or putting one toe in. There's a ton.
There's dozens of them that I talk to in my MAGA community that organizes patriot activism. Like, there's lots of people that are on the precipice of wanting to do what we do that we all should be doing. I agree.
Yeah, there's a ton, and potentially the people who are ripe for it, literally millions. But there's a subset of people, what I was getting at, who I'm sure there's a subset of people who have been taught to believe that people like you and I, who get up here and maybe show a friendlier, more family-friendly image, are just doing it because we're a little slicker. And behind closed doors, when we're at that barbecue, we're just as hateful and just as sloppy as these other people.
I've been accused of that several times, and most of the people that have taken the time to speak with me for a long period of time after that accusation, I have dispelled that. And they realize that I am genuine and I'm not just some likable front or polish on an otherwise unlikable collection of ideas that are based on, ugly negative things.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's important to say. I know, and I guess it's just the right time for it. I didn't say these things more as plainly earlier. First of all, because there's an element where you don't really want to even give it attention, because the more you give something attention, it kind of festers and grows usually. I kind of thought that who I am and what I do, it just should be obvious. I'm not that kind of person. And I think mostly that is the case. And also there's that notion of, you see a lot of more centrist type people who get up there and they virtue signal and they disavow certain people, or, they say certain things to enamor themselves more with the average Joe out there. And so, you think to yourself, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who's saying, but I had black friends too. But you think to yourself like, well, I did. And if you're going to think, if I'm going to be lumped in with people who aren't that way and really are these people who, God bless them, we're all on different journeys. I hope they come our way soon eventually, but they're in a place in their lives, they're in a state of being right now where they do sit around and say, F these guys, and F these, and we want to put all these guys in camp, and that's not, you think when Jason and I speak privately, that's what we're saying? Like, that's not what's going on. So to some extent, you have to be like, look, if you people are going to think that you're going to lump us in with that, I'm going to have to push back on that a bit.
Yeah, because one of the things that is important to talk about with white well-being is well-being does not come from negativity and persecution. Well-being comes from the opposite of that: celebration, unity, positivity, love, family, creating beautiful things. And behind closed doors, none of the patriot MAGA types I talk to talk about persecuting people or ethnic cleansing or any of that. And the nationalist types that I talk to, both in the UK and here in America, we don't talk about that stuff behind closed doors. The only kind of people that talk about that kind of ugly stuff are very fringe, even to me and the people that I associate with, and we don't like them. So I think that message is going to be very clear the more that people like you and I are able to bring regular folks over to the concept that white well-being is not based in some kind of opposite well-being to any other group or type of people.
Two quick thoughts. First of all, the first thought is, what if one of us had the opportunity, unedited, uncensored, to go on something that would be a game changer, like a Joe Rogan show?
Yeah.
What if Joe Rogan was secretly watching some of us and said, all right, I mean, I know he has a contract with Sirius now, so maybe this wouldn't happen, but just go with the hypothetical.
Sure.
Something that would get us in front of millions of eyeballs. Who would you want up there? You'd want someone pointing back to antique nationalism, confirming all the Hollywood stereotypes. You know what that Joe Rogan appearance would do? Not only would it do absolutely nothing, it would do all the people like us who our heart is in the right place. We probably have knocks on our doors from the authorities. It would go. There'd be a negative repercussion. It'd be like, yep, this is what they're really about. Okay.
At the very least, it would end up with thousands of us getting our channels and accounts terminated.
Yeah, and that's the best case scenario. That's a walk in the park compared to other things going on right now. So that's the first thing I want people to think about. Where if there was a watershed moment, who do you want on a Joe Rogan show? What kind of person? Now, I'm not talking about like vote for me. I want to be on Joe Rogan. I'm saying just the energy behind it. Let's say it was like a new person that none of us know yet, but whose message they would be carrying. So again, I'm not talking about the person. I'm not putting this through the vector, to use your term, of a popularity contest. I'm just saying the message. What message would you want if someone could articulate that message very well in front of millions of people on, say, a national show that your average Joe watches, like a Joe Rogan? What message, what energy would you want there? That's the first thing. And the second thing is this. Again, I'm no expert, but I do like weaving in, as you know, our European myth and symbolism, imagery, folklore into what I do. I talk about it a lot with John. We've had some really interesting conversations recently, particularly about King Arthur and Robin Hood. John's actually working on a book that is a retelling, his own version of the Robin Hood myth. And
that sounds lovely. I'll have a read of that when it's done.
John's an interesting guy, but I'm reading some of the Howard Pyle renditions from the late 1800s of the King Arthur stories. You know what I noticed in those King Arthur stories, or what I remember of fairy tales from when I was a kid? The heroes, our Western heroes, they never go out looking for trouble, but they are uncompromising sources of order. And when there is trouble, they will defend the realm. They will set things back to right. They are men of action. They're not wimps. But they don't go attack.
And also, and one quick thing, they speak the truth. Even if it's unpleasant, they speak the truth.
They speak the truth. They speak it virtuously. They speak well. Even Robin Hood, these outlaws in these books, if you read how they spoke, it's not just that it's with these and thous and that gives it the window dressing of seeming fancy. It's actually the turns of phrases and the way they explain things. There was a tradition there where these were still people who, as you said, they spoke the truth and they had integrity. They wanted to cut through to the essence of something. So they spoke well and they spoke beautifully. They spoke artistically. They spoke in metaphors and images. But in terms of being a protector, in terms of being a warrior, they set things back to rights. They fought the good fight when it needed to be fought, but they didn't sit around stewing about how they hated this guy up in this castle up here. He's taking too much land. He's doing the wrong thing. And they didn't sit around for years and years hating him and spewing him and talking about how they're ruining their lives. They're ruining his life. They went and took care of business and they got back to center. Yep. There's something very telling about that kind of approach to heroism and something that we need to embody in ourselves.
I agree. And that's why I've said for a long time now, one of my earliest videos was talking about how we need to be the heroes we want to see, because no more do they exist in the elites. The elites aren't even elites anymore. They're oppressive oligarchs. We don't have the champions in modernity that we once did. They're all fictitious now. They're all gone. So we have to be the heroes because we're the only ones left now. It's up to us to be the heroes now. And maybe the stories in the future will be written about people like you and I, Jared, or the people that we inspire that come next. They're the ones that are going to be the heroes, and we'll be our heroes going forward together.
Someone has to imagine that and think that big, or people are going to flounder and lives are going to be ruined. You know, there are people who are on some tough times right now, caught up in drugs, thinking about suicide. You know, we get letters all the time, specifically because of what Jason does with his work, with the psychological tools he gives people to get meaning back in their lives, and kind of, I use that metaphor from They Live, kind of put the glasses on and see the actual messaging behind things. He's had many, as you know, many people write to him and saying they got off drugs, they got off the path to suicide. I mean, you know, it's not a show. Jason is a warrior. If you read his book and what he went through as a kid and the fights he had to have, and he was a top athlete, he's got a lot of warrior energy. But this man is teared up on camera because of testimonials about people who got off of the path to suicide because of this kind of thing. Guys, we need these stories. Everyone needs meaning, and they need a story to hook into. We have our people.
And we only inspire that by being heroes. We can't be any kind of villain, especially the villains in the anti-white narrative. If we're villains, we only inspire villainry and negativity. But when you're a hero, when you're a champion of your people, when you are a legendary father, mother, educator, artist, creator, you inspire positivity and give people a reason to get out of a bad relationship. You give people a reason to get off heroin. You give people a reason to not kill themselves. Like, it's positivity and a holistic approach using normal connectivity, artwork, music. That is the way forward for our people, and that's the message that people should hear. And so, to wrap it up in a nice bow before we move on to comments and stuff, that is definitely what, I don't know, I think that's the best way to wrap it up, what you said about who would you want to have on Joe Rogan. You know, you would want a message like that instead of one of hostility, negativity, and that kind of thing. So what we're going to do now is we are at the mark where it is time to go check comments again. We're going to refresh PayPal and Entropy and see what we have going on over here. Over on Cash App, still nothing over on Cash App. Let's see what we have over on PayPal. Still nothing on PayPal. Over on Entropy, we have Western Resonance. Hello, Western Resonance. Good to see you, friend. He has a question for you, Jared. He says, has Jared personally felt any significant difference in his physical being since tuning to 432? I don't know what that means. Do you?
Yes, I do. Okay. Some of my music is tuned to a bit of a different frequency base than, how do I explain this quickly without losing people? So you know how when you hit a note on a piano, you say, this is A?
Yeah.
Why do we call that A? To some degree, and no, this isn't anti-white Bolshevik nonsense. To some degree, it's just us arbitrarily organizing that this frequency is A. Okay. So middle, I've promised you guys, I'm going to be quick. We're not going to get into the weeds here. Middle A on a piano, when you hit that key, it resonates at 440 hertz per second. Okay, so like the actual sound waves in the air, 440 hertz. Well, there's not a natural reason it necessarily has to be that way. And there's a lot of literature that says how orchestras, you were talking about classical music earlier, I like classical music too, even though I'm not a classical music composer, were tuned to different frequencies. And there's a theory that certain frequencies are more naturally harmonious to the human organism. One way to demonstrate this, or just to the order of life itself, one quick way to demonstrate this is if you have these frequencies play loud enough in front of a surface that vibrates, and you put sand on it, at certain key frequencies, the sand, look this up, it's amazing, it's called cymatics, Cymatics. The sand on the vibrating surface will organize into shapes. It looks like kind of like snowflakes or crystal shapes.
Oh, I see. I just put it in the search engine. Yeah, okay. I'll have a look at that later. That seems cool.
The fact that certain frequencies, when the table vibrates and the sand kind of organizes under these shapes, the thinking is that that same thing is happening in the water in your body, in your molecular structure. And so, again, that certain frequencies are more harmonious, engender life, have these codes of life. That's why it kind of forms into these crystalline snowflake shapes. So I tune my guitar with that frequency base instead of the standard, the modern 440 for middle A is 432. And I've also done 444. That's another one. I use it often. I'm writing new music that's in that as well. The first song we listened to, Someone to Know, is in 432. The one you're going to play at the end, the slower one called Far Away, is in 444. It just sounded a little too detuned and dreamy, and my voice was a little too low. So depending on musically what makes sense, I'll use one of those frequencies. I used it to answer Western Resonance's question. I've been using it for so long, I can't even say. The thing that convinced me of it, because I know how this sounds. I know, like anything, some people are going to hear this and think, oh, that just sounds like mumbo jumbo nonsense. What I did was I had a synthesizer at the time, and I put headphones on, and I could change on the digital display of the synthesizer. I could change where the frequency base was, so I could try this 432 hertz music. And I would just kind of hit notes, and I did it on a synthesizer because those are pure tones. They're just waveforms. If anyone can imagine in their mind's ear what like an analog synthesizer sounds like. And when I'd hit the notes in the 432, it would just kind of, even though I was holding one note, it would vibrate and kind of in circle, go around from left to right and right to left, wearing the headphones. There was just something more well-rounded about it, and something clicked for me, and it seemed like it was the right way to go. So since that time, and when I've been playing with it, but when I released music publicly under the Great Order, I definitely knew I wanted to do that kind of music. And this is kind of a more esoteric, underneath the tip of the iceberg thing about what I'm trying to put out there. Because when you're talking about music, you're literally talking about frequencies. I'm putting frequencies, a trail of energy, out into the world from the music I make. If anyone wants to get deeper into it, just go to the music interviews on my website. And I did a few in December after that first song was released, and I talk about this more in depth. Actually, John asked me about it on our show. Jason asked me about it on his show, on our show together.
Speaking of your website, we're going to put that up on screen again here, and I'm going to link it in the chat for everyone while we're talking, okay?
Yeah, it's thegreatorder.com. Jody Kay and I mentioned her earlier, over in the UK. She being a musician, we had a great talk about music as well. So it's hard to say. It's not like you listen to it and all of a sudden you feel like you just took a shot of something, some supplement that would spike your energy level. It's something more subtle. So I can't speak to something where there's a before and after moment. And I still listen to music, of course. Most of the music I listen to is still in the regular standard 440 tuning. So to Western Resonance, there's nothing, I can't say that there's this specific thing I can point to, but I've seen and read enough, and I've experimented with the sounds enough. I guess the most physiological response is the story I told about the headphones and the synthesizer, and kind of feeling it was a healthier, more well-rounded sound kind of circulating my head. That was the most physiological response I've had to it.
Cool. Also on Entropy, we have Slots, which I'm sure you're aware of. Our friend Slots, Promethean hails to you, friend. He says, on Joe Rogan, I'd emphasize our destiny as a people against anti-whiteism. And yes, absolutely. That's anti-whiteism and the oppression of our people is a good message to rally behind, because I'm pretty sure that every Westerner, even vagues, have had to confront the fact in the modern era, especially the last 12 months, that there are governments, corporations, and organizations that specifically are anti-white on purpose, unashamedly. And that is a powerful message of unification, I think, for a speaking point, is using the word anti-whiteism to call it exactly what it is. Don't use the name of our oppressors' choosing. So,
oh yeah. That is, we know that, and that's something Jason's given us and been very clear on. Um, Remember, my point too was not only about what you say, but how you say it. It's the kind of person that would be on Joe Rogan. It's the energy. It's, are they angry and preaching at you, or are they able to relate to Joe as just a regular guy and shoot the breeze? And I use this word on PWR. I know it has a bit of a negative connotation, but I use it in the older sense of the term, in the best sense of the term. When you think about lovers and falling in love with someone, is to seduce people. Being a public communicator, you have to, as I was talking about Instagram before, you bring someone into your story. All of us, we're bringing you into a story here. We're bringing you into a different way of seeing things, a different narrative. You have to have people who have the social intelligence, not just the raw academic intelligence, but the social intelligence. The future belongs to those of us with social intelligence, to be able to put this over and have the flexibility to speak to different kinds of people on their own level about it, while at the same time not compromising the key points, dancing that dance.
that is all over on entropy. So let's go ahead and move on towards the last segment of the show now. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, if you wanted to today, was Jared is also a poet. And there is a segment that I'm going to share on screen right now that are the poems of the Great Order. And there it is on screen. The poetry of the Great Order here. Is there a particular poem or something that you'd like to talk about in regards to your poetry, if not reading here for us, Jared?
Well, if we read one, it should be a slow one. I don't know how well they play on how well that will play on a stream. We should leave it to the chat. We'll see if we get like a majority of people that vote for it. But I'll just briefly say, I guess it kind of comes out of lyric writing. I'm really primarily a songwriter, but I love language too, and playing images and getting, I guess, more deeply, it's communicating things that just escape pure rationalization. As much as I get up here and have to organize my thoughts to be somewhat coherent on a stream, where I'm most comfortable really is in that more web-like mythopoetic mind. I'm getting some feedback through your speaker. I don't know if you're able to move the bullet. Are you hearing that yet?
It's a little muted. Can you say it again?
I'm getting a little feedback. I'm hearing myself through you.
Yeah. I just got a message in private chat from Kizza saying there was an issue with my audio, and I didn't toggle or change anything on my end. So, like I said, like we say every stream, I unfortunately am on hillbilly internet. So if my voice gets garbled or changes, or if the video feed freezes, I don't think that there's anything I can do about it. I've already got the optimal settings on my end. So I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got.
Well, you sounded fine before. It just got deeper, and that's happened to other people before. I've heard that happen before.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this, because I bought a new microphone, a podcast quality microphone by Samsung, and there's a communications version of it, and sometimes the audio encoding goes to the communication mode and it drops my voice like half an octave. It's really weird. So I'm going to reinitialize my mic setup here. So I'm going to drop out for just a second.
Yeah, I no worries. As I said, people were able to hear you. I was able to understand you fine. It just got deeper. It's a funny effect. And I've definitely seen it happen to some friends of mine. But just goes to show, folks, we don't have what CNN has. We don't have tens, hundreds of millions of dollars of anti-white money behind us. We're just doing what we can, and it's a beautiful thing. I was asked about my poems, so I'll just briefly say I like trying to. I guess I have a poet's instinct. I don't even know if it's right to call me a poet, because I'm not like Nullis, if any of you know him, or some of these other guys where it's my stock and trade, and I've read a lot of poetry and I know a lot about poetry. It's just more of a byproduct, as I said, of the fact that I write songs and lyrics, and sometimes there's something I want to say that goes beyond that rational mind, kind of pierces through the cracks of what you can, pushing language. And when I get beyond where I can go with language, that's where my instinct takes me into music. And there's just pure forms of music, energy, vibrations, like we were speaking about earlier. But I write in a variety of styles. Some of them are a little more symbolic. That first one, that's the most current one, Spring Singing, on the top of the page there. That was in WPQ magazine, and it's actually appropriate for this time of year. It's kind of an ode to nature, and that's written in a bit of an older style.
Well, how's my audio? I unplugged and replugged everything and reinitialized
Much
OBS.
better.
I sound better now? Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I didn't bump anything. I didn't unplug anything. It's just one of those random gremlins of technology, I suppose. Perhaps I'll get a handle on it in the future, but don't count your chickens. Do you want to read this poem, or would you like me to read it for us since it is springtime?
Well, I can if you'd like. As I said, I don't know if the audience wants to hear it, if the chat wants to hear it, how well that'll go over on a...
Well, let's see here. Type a 1 in chat if you would like to hear the great Jared George read one of his poems for us at the Corner Club here. Type a 1 in chat if you'd like to hear it. I would like to hear it, so I'm going to put a 1 in chat.
Some of these have been published online. Some of them have been published in magazines. And you know how if you go there, all the titles are in red? So Yizz is showing you my poems page where all of them are. But if you click on the red, it'll take you to each poem also has its own post. And on the post for the poem, I have a little image that goes along with it. If it was published anywhere, I give you information on that. If it was published online, it's a link. So each poem has its own post as well.
There we go. I have it on screen now. And it's got beautiful artwork with it.
Yes, that's exactly. So when you're on the poem's main page or you scroll through, if you click on the red title, you get something like that, where that's the particular post for, in this case, the poem called Spring Singing.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of 1s in the chat. There's at least 12. So if you don't mind, could you read this wonderful poem of yours for us?
Sure.
We'll give you a moment to have a drink and get ready
channel the bark energy. So hopefully you'll hear what I meant about this one has a bit of an older style and language.
Well, I'm going to put the link to this in the chat if you guys want to have it to read along with. But go ahead and lay it on us, Jared, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, every poet has to have their ode to nature, right? Enjoying, especially our Western instincts of enjoying the beautiful natural world. And we just crossed into spring. So without any further ado, Spring Singing. Come now to the wild welcome, the day's light touch, the simmering song. Set right the path for trailing hours, and on and on and on. Green rolls in, fresh earth and tide, births bright secrets in its folds. The sun begins to kiss more boldly, our limbs more noble in our strolls. Open roads frame blooming tones, and we, the crowd, to cheer the aspect. This starts what may, the timeless sway, facing neither past nor prospect. The merry way all down the lane, thanksgiving for each reed stem, each blade of grass and flower full, untroubled smiles to greet them. We take our place amongst the play, teased by the winged mates we witness, call bounty up, the teeming cup, each glance meets our ripe mistress. We stride inside the daytime star, all yellow blue at noon. Electric flows from our sphere's core, within the cosmic tune. All bridged, we ground the stars, watch daylight pleasures brought to bear, and knowing wholly, seeing solely, claiming we are there.
Well, that was beautiful. I enjoy this kind of poetry that's not trying to be something that it isn't. It's this poem to me is just, it's you celebrating what you feel and see about springtime and sharing your thoughts on a more natural, growth and unity among people, supposedly. I'm not trying to postmodern your meaning here, but what was going through your mind, or what were you experiencing when you wrote that, or what was the message you wanted to deliver with that? Is there one?
Well, as you know, with any form of art, it's not your own entirely once you release it into the world. So you're, not to sound too postmodern, but you take your own meaning, your interpretation with it, there is still, of course, a truth to that as well. As I was saying in the beginning, just because the postmoderns and all the anti-white nonsense has ruined that stuff, doesn't mean that there's no truth in that. We still have to be able to be wise and suss out what really is true and what they're saying and claim it back for us. It was really just, for me, just the joy of a walk with the blue sky and the sun and flowers and plants and trees beginning to bloom, that feeling in your chest when you're excited about spring and
I'm smiling and happy just thinking about it, because
really,
I love being out among that kind of thing and feeling life and nature and a connection among things. That's why in my morning walk videos, I oftentimes encourage people to, no matter where you live, even if it's in a city, take the time to feel a tree, smell a flower, listen to birds, do nothing else. Just empty your mind, breathe whatever you can breathe, and feel that you're a part of something that isn't social media, that isn't corporate advertising, that isn't an endless onslaught of television ads. Like, we are part of something bigger and greater than what the ugly narrative wants us to think that we're part of. And one of the things of this poem that meant a lot to me was talking about the stars and growing and reaching. Like, say what you want about the word progressive and how that's ugly these days to us, but in my mind, I don't even think that Western kind is limited to this planet. I dream about one day our progeny in the future taking the beautiful things they've learned from us, everything from ancient religions to enlightenment and technology, and going to other planets, viewing other stars, creating new expressions of our biospirit across the stars, maybe even being able to create our own planets and stars one day. Like, that's the kind of thing I think about when I meditate outside or sit in the woods and just think about what we can do and where we can grow as a people. And that the last bit of that poem made me think of that.
Well, it's definitely a very Western instinct to want to reach and reach and reach and see if you could go beyond the perceived limits. It's the feel when you're clicked into that, and I totally agree, is sometimes, as wonderful as it is to be organized and be productive and get things done, check things off your to-do list. And I'm working on that too. As I mentioned before the show, I wanted to have a couple of more songs out in 2021 already. And I'm like freaking out a little bit that I haven't, but there's reasons I had to kind of recalibrate. In the long run, getting my schedule even more attuned, I should be able to flow with things more. But all that to say, there has to be times when you don't give yourself something to do and you can just sit in nature and be with it, or be with a loved one and see what naturally comes from that. And when you're clicked in, this poem in particular, there's like motion to it. I was picturing a walk. I talk about walking down the merry lane.
I was thinking about walking through beautiful, picturesque countrysides, sort of like the Shire in the Lord of the Rings movies, and just feeling and smelling and listening to all the people and the children playing. When you were reading that, I was envisioning that too.
Yeah, it's kind of like you see this in cartoons. It's almost like as you walk down that lane, it's all coming in. It's all bursting to life for you in this symphony, as if your consciousness, your attention on it is in the moment making it come alive. When you're clicked into that, there is this joy where your heart feels like it wants to jump out of your chest. It's a form of love. And that kind of thing is what was behind it. The Wind in the Willows is one of my favorite books. Yes, it's for children, but I can still read it as an adult. It has beautiful language in it. It's beautifully written. I often read it in springtime. I actually read it last spring, just when the lockdown was beginning, kind of treated myself with that. And some of the beautiful language that Kenneth Grahame paints in the beginning of that book, especially, it begins with spring, mold doing a spring cleaning. It made me think of that. It was kind of a reference, the feeling I get from that as well.
Well, I do appreciate you reading that for us. Thank you very much. As we move towards the end of the show now, I'm going to show the website for the after party now. The after party is the website for the stream podcast that Jared and Jason do together. The After Party TV, I will be putting the link in the description here. This website is so even if Susan pulls the plug, even if the other websites that host us decide to not one day, this website has all of the hundreds of hours of wonderful content of white positive people getting together and talking about our civilization and what's important to us. And it's all backlogged here. You can go here to learn about homesteading, homeschooling, relationships, health, etc. With Sarah Dye. That was the most recent one. And as you can see, Jared himself was on PWR with Mark Collette and Jason recently. That was just this past Wednesday, right?
2 days ago, yes.
Yeah, 2 days ago. So that is definitely where you can find the podcast for the after party and associated links. And then, of course, sharing in chat again is the Great Order. That's Jared's website. And Jared, as we move towards the end of the show, I would like to remind our viewers, now is the time, my friends. If there's anything that you would like to ask us, or if you'd like to get in last-minute financial gifts, now is the time to do that. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to be putting the links myself into chat. And right before we get out of here, I'll be checking them again. So now is the time, friends, if you would like to donate or ask Mr. George some questions. So during this part, for the next couple of minutes, Jared, why don't you tell us about upcoming projects you might have and things that you're working on that you'd like my community to know, or other places that you would like to share, or places that you'd like them to reach you and find you.
Well, you just mentioned the After Party website, and then my own site, as you keep saying, is thegreatorder.com. And really, the most important thing is to bookmark those and to get on the mailing lists. We barely send out mailings. I mean, the main thing is really it would be a way for us to communicate with you if the plug was pulled on us simultaneously, all at once on all the social media. Of course, I do encourage you to follow me on social media, and all my links are on that site as well. But as Yizz was saying, I actually embed both on my own site. There is, when it comes to a show like the After Party that I'm on, obviously there's crossover where it'll be on my site, thegreatorder.com, and it'll be on the afterparty.tv as well. Jason's Going Free streams are also on the After Party and some other projects we've done. But I just want to let people know I've taken a lot of effort to make sure that it's hosted in another country, and all the video embedding that you can watch right in a post, it doesn't pull from any social media video platform. It's set up in a different way that's hopefully more robust. So we're doing what we can to leave a footprint. Like, we want people to know this is what people were cared about and we're talking about and we're struggling with in 2020 and 2021 and 2022. We're not trying to just be an internet show, collect some super chats, and then disappear. We're trying to leave a footprint here, and we're trying to leave all the valuable information from our wonderful guests. If you want to go listen and hear about a certain subject, homesteading, type in homesteading into the search bar, and any show that we talked about homesteading, it will come up. I tag the shows by the things we talk about. We're trying to, especially, I wish every show had timestamps. I don't have the time to do that with all of them. We'd need an intern. But
yeah.
We're trying.
We need a lot of things. We, like you said earlier, we lack the funding and the manpower that the anti-white narrative has.
This is just us doing everything ourselves, but we're trying to make it as available to you and as searchable, as usable, as easy. So as I said, whether it is a subject that we spoke about in a show or a particular guest, go to the search bar and see, oh, I like Sarah Dye. Type in her name. She's actually been on before. That wasn't her first appearance. You want to hear our first show with her. Usually when we have someone on the After Party the first time, it's very much like a broad yet deep about what makes them tick. I wanted to have a show that went deeper than anywhere else, although you're doing a damn good job with interviewing people, with really, you see these
I do appreciate that. I'm doing my best. I know that it's rocky and I don't have the best internet or equipment yet, but I'm doing all I can for us.
That doesn't matter. And we clearly pulled off a whole show now with just video. So that's monumental in the Eunuch Corner Club history.
Yeah.
But yes, we're doing our best to make sure that everything we do is very shareable and usable. But what I say with the After Party is that show is really the first time someone's on. I want to make it a very well-rounded, in-depth interview. So you really get to know, you like this particular activist or content creator, really how they got here, what makes them tick. And then when they come back on, we could get more specifically into certain things that they're about. So Sarah had been on last June, and we got to know her and her story, which is an incredible story. And now we could say, hey, let's be a little more specialized. You're a farmer, you know about homesteading, you homeschool your kids. We have people asking us about those particular topics. So that was more on those topics. But like anything, the conversation hit a few different marks. As you saw, we spoke about mental health, relationships, as well as the title.
Uh-huh. The thing that you said about leaving it there for others to find, one of the metaphors that I like to use when talking about why what you do, what I do, what all of us do is important with the journeys that we're on, is just like how in video games and fiction and even in real life in times of old, people that were pioneers would leave markers and signs for those who wanted to come join them or go on a similar path. They can learn from what we leave behind. And it's important to think in terms of the modern era. What legacy will our actions leave? What if I'm hit by a bus? What if the anti-whites take me out one day? What if we get scrubbed from all modern social media? What will we have really accomplished if we are so easily erased? And that's why it's important for us to do what you're talking about, or what you are doing, not just talking about, creating ways for us to leave markers, to leave signs for those who want to do similar things. Maybe we can help them along their way and they can do better than we did. So with that beautiful sentiment,
very well said. May I just say, I also helped organize, talking of physical artifacts, the folk book. It's a coffee table book, and I'll put that link in our private chat so you can share.
Yeah, please do, and I'll share it in the chats here for us.
But I'm sorry, you were saying.
Tell me the name of it one more time.
Well, it's a coffee table book called Folk, and basically,
Folk.
Yeah,
I remember you talking about that on a stream recently, I think.
Yeah.
Did you talk about that on the stream with Sarah recently?
I think it came up briefly. It came out the end of last year, and I helped organize it. It has, I wrote a piece in it, and 10 other content creators and activists from around the Western world. We were very keen to have people from Australia, Europe, US, Canada. No, actually, I don't think anyone's from Canada, but so scratch that. But we have spoken to people from Canada.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful book with a lot of Western art in it. And everyone was left to their own devices to answer the question, what does being a people mean? And we took different approaches. It's essays, except I actually took a different tack. Mine's a short story. I imagine a different future, a more positive future, told through the eyes of a young boy and girl, brother and sister.
Well, to wrap up, since we're almost at time here, we're going to move to the couple of things that we have from the community. I'm going to go ahead and refresh PayPal and Cash App again just to see if anything has popped up. But we do have two things, one thing from Trovo and one thing from Entropy. On Trovo, we have Morty that says, what about having a website that aggregates all of the White Positive live streams and podcasts into one place, like a one-stop shopping site? That's very much what the After Party TV is going to be, is, and what you're talking about would require a lot of creators working together, and that is a good idea. Jared, maybe going forward, we could talk to Jason, Mark, the Lana and Henrik over at Red Ice, maybe try to get something together that's some kind of aggregate site if there isn't already one. That's a good idea.
I believe there are people working on that already, actually. I think so too. Already. I know there are channels on Telegram that, they cast a wide net. It's everyone in the white sympathetic sphere. But it'll tell you upcoming shows, things like that. But I do think there are people working on aggregator. And you, Liz, Yizz, you got the link to the whitepeoplepress.com with the folk book. You're able to put that in the chat. I put it on.
Oh, yeah. Just a second.
Yeah, if you put that in the chat, then people can see the coffee table book I was referring to.
Yeah, I shared the link that you put in private chat already. Did you want to share a different one?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. In general, White People Press is where you can go to get white positive folk-based material. Over on DLive, we have, hello Alex and everyone else over on DLive. We had The Rock 2021 donate a diamond. Alex donating the correct number of lemons. And last but not least, over on Entropy. Oh, no, I was wrong. Entropy is clear. I thought there was something new. Oh, it's because I refreshed it. It loaded in things that I'd already seen. Okay, that's what it was. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Jared. I really do appreciate it. And I'd like to remind everyone, do what Jared and I do, even if it's not online. Do it in your personal lives. Carry the flame of positivity, passion, compassion to everyone in your life, and let them know you're not ashamed to talk about our people being oppressed, and approach people in a regular way. Talk about the things that are in their life. Talk about what's going on at school or at your church. Positivity starts with us. We have to be the heroes we want to see in the world, because there aren't anyone left but us. And with that being said, we're going to get out of here with another Jared George song called Far Away. So, Kizza, thank you for being here to moderate and being my co-host today. Is there anything you've got cooking you want to tell everybody before we get out of here?
Not really, but actually, Yizz. Both of us, if memory serves, along with Don the Pleb, will be joined.
You froze, Kizza. Did you mute yourself or did you lose internet?
Oh, hello. Is my
there you go.
Back?
There you go. Yeah, you've got it now.
Yeah, yes. I believe both of us are going to be on a stream with our friend Bill and Tank, All Minus One, and the Unjustified of Memes, with Don the Pleb next Friday, I believe, if everything goes to plan.
That is the plan, and I'll definitely be sharing those links next week with my community, hopefully to get us some more viewers over there. So Don the Pleb, Bill and Tank, we're going to have a community stream where we just drink and laugh and have fun together. So that's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and as for me, myself, I'm still working on a piece, The Mirror Veritas, which our guest Jared here might be very much interested in.
Well, we'll definitely tell him about it after we're done here, but I do have another stream to get to tonight, so I need to wrap up quickly.
Yes, you do. You do.
Speaking of the other stream, tonight I'm going to be a featured guest on the Cigar stream over on Academic Agents channel, where we're going to be talking about patriotism and nationalism, how those two things are different, and how they might be flawed as a concept, as well as my particular issues I have with the ever so popular Julius Evola's Ride the Tiger. So it'll be definitely a fun stream that'll last for about 3 hours. If you guys want to come check that out, that'll be starting here in a couple of hours. So I'll put the link to his channel in the description. So we are going to play out with the great Jared George's Far Away song. Thank you again for being here, Jared. It was a lovely time. We'll definitely be in touch and do something like this again soon. Okay, my friend? Hello, Jared? Are you there?
Wow. You know, I did that on PWR too, and I never do that on my own show. I was muted. I swear, I've done this a few times, but I was just saying thank you. It was lovely, and all my best to everyone listening now or in replay.
Thank you very much. We're going to play it. We're going to play out now with the wonderful song "Far Away" by Jared George. Jared and Kizza, don't go anywhere. We'll speak after this song's over. So we'll see you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care, all.
I was dreaming with the people, and you know the song seems so far away. Many lived and died to find the light away. I was sleeping rather peaceful, sure as sunlight starts the day. Something shined and brought me to my feet again. I saw mountains rise and crumble in a day. Time was just another play. And she said, far away. It's so close that you wouldn't believe it. Hide away. Now come undone, far away. It's so close that you wouldn't believe it. Hide away. Now come undone. We were seeking all the pieces, but it's not just what you say and what you do. If you're not letting the heart close that you wouldn't believe it. Now the way have come undone, far away. It's so close that you wouldn't believe it. Now that we have come undone. Circling again. No need to look back from now to then. I love being here with you. I know you and you me too. Far away. It's out here and we plainly can see it. Now the way have come undone. Oh, I'm a stowaway. In a world that you wouldn't believe, it's not far away. I've come undone, oh, far away. It's so close and I know you can